On August 2, 1990, the dictator of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, ordered his army to invade the small nation of Kuwait. Why? It was all about oil. By controlling Kuwait, Iraq hoped to gain access to its massive oil reserves and cripple the OPEC nation's ability to influence global oil prices. But Kuwait was not just going to accept being bullied by its powerful northern neighbor. And so began one of the most consequential conflicts of the late 20th century, the Gulf War. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe for more content. Thanks guys. Now let's begin. With the Kuwaiti army pushed back, Hussein declared victory and set his sights on Saudi Arabia, which would surely fall to the Iraqi military. Right. Wrong. The United States had other plans for Saddam. President George Bush quickly assembled a multinational coalition to liberate Kuwait and punish Iraq for its unjustifiable aggression. More than 34 nations contributed to the US-led coalition with 350,000 troops, 60 ships, and 186 aircraft. Not to mention 2 million volunteer reservists were called up by the US alone. As you can imagine, this presented some pretty massive logistical challenges, especially since much of the coalition force was untrained for desert warfare or prepared for life in the unforgiving Kuwaiti desert. To make matters worse, the coalition forces would have to cross thousands of miles of hostile terrain, an incredibly difficult task in the best of circumstances. By November, the US and its allies had positioned hundreds of thousands of troops around Saudi Arabia, facing off against Iraq. On December, after 6 months of preparation, Operation Desert Storm began with a massive air campaign that caught Iraq completely by surprise. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flew through the night, dropping high-precision laser-guided bombs on key targets. After successfully striking 100 different sites in the first 7 hours, stealth fighters like the F-117 Nighthawk took to the skies, engaging Iraqi anti-aircraft defenses and flying cover missions for other coalition aircraft. By the end of the bombing campaign, 89% of all Iraqi tanks had been destroyed, along with 90% of their combat aircraft. This staggering success demonstrated just how far ahead of the US military was in terms of technology. But the real test was yet to come. As American Abrams tanks rolled across the border into Kuwait on February 24, 1991, it became clear that the Iraqi military simply could not compete with the technologically superior US Army. Within 100 hours, the entire Kuwaiti military was liberated and Iraqi resistance was crumbling. Seeing that the game was up, Saddam announced a ceasefire on February 8. With the ceasefire in place, the fighting officially came to an end and the US and its allies had emerged victorious. But even though the Americans had decisively won the war, many critics pointed out that the true victor was technology. From stealth aircraft to satellite reconnaissance to Tomahawk missiles, the Gulf War showed that wars would be decided more and more by technological superiority, rather than sheer force of arms. It's also safe to say that no one expected the US military to come out of the conflict relatively unscathed. That's because American troops suffered less than 150 battle-related deaths during the entire war. In fact, only 38 American service members were killed in direct combat. And there's good reason for that. You see, Operation Desert Storm involved some of the most advanced technology ever used in combat, from the stealth bomber to the Tomahawk missile. These advancements allowed the US to wage war from afar, minimizing casualties and maximizing destruction. For example, the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter was designed to penetrate enemy airspace undetected, engaging air defenses and bombing targets without risking the lives of pilots. Meanwhile, the Tomahawk missile could be launched from ships and submarines far away from danger, hitting targets with pinpoint accuracy. This use of high-tech weaponry not only resulted in fewer casualties, but also demonstrated the growing importance of technology in modern warfare. Canada's role in the Gulf War was significant despite the small size of its contribution to the coalition force. Canada deployed 2 fleets of warships to the Persian Gulf, the largest naval deployment since the Second World War. These ships played an important role in enforcing the United Nations embargo on Iraq and protecting the maritime routes to Kuwait. In addition to the naval deployment, Canada also deployed 2 CF-18 squadrons to Saudi Arabia. These aircraft flew over 900 combat sorties, providing air cover for ground troops and engaging Iraqi forces. Although Canadian forces did not see any major confrontations, their presence was still seen as a significant contribution to the overall success of the coalition force. Furthermore, Canada's contribution to the Gulf War had a lasting impact on the country's military and foreign policy. The deployment of Canadian forces to the Middle East showed the world that Canada was willing to contribute to international peace and security operations. This commitment would serve Canada well in the years to come, when it became a major contributor to the NATO mission in Afghanistan. Now, while the United Nations did authorize military action to liberate Kuwait, America's decision to go to war was actually far from unanimous. Many countries, including the UK, France, and Russia, opposed the conflict. This opposition was due to a number of factors, including concerns about the potential loss of life, the cost of the war, and the impact on the global economy. Additionally, some countries felt that the United States was overreacting to the situation in Kuwait and that diplomacy should have been given more of a chance. However, the US and its allies ultimately decided to go to war despite this opposition, demonstrating the growing influence of the United States on the world stage. Nevertheless, even with overwhelming military superiority, the Gulf War was not without its challenges. The US military faced numerous obstacles throughout the conflict, from the vast and unfamiliar terrain of the Kuwaiti desert to the wily Iraqi military tactics. Despite these challenges, the US military was able to prevail. Thanks to its advanced technology, superior training, and the support of its coalition partners, one of the most significant challenges faced by the US military during the Gulf War was the vast and unfamiliar terrain of the Kuwaiti desert. The soldiers were not accustomed to fighting in such harsh conditions, and they had to contend with extreme temperatures, sandstorms, and limited water resources. Additionally, the Iraqi military had taken advantage of the terrain to dig in and defend their positions. Despite these challenges, the US military was able to adapt and overcome. They used advanced technologies such as GPS and satellite imagery to navigate the desert, and they developed new tactics to counter the Iraqi defenses. Ultimately, the US military's ability to adapt and innovate was crucial to its success in the Gulf War. It goes without saying that the Gulf War was a defining moment in the history of modern warfare. The conflict showcased the growing importance of technology in modern battles, with the US military's superior technology playing a key role in its success. Additionally, the war demonstrated the changing nature of international conflict, with the US leading a multinational coalition to achieve its foreign policy objectives. Finally, the Gulf War had a profound impact on the Middle East, setting the stage for future conflicts in the region and highlighting the ongoing tensions between the West and the Arab world. The war also left an indelible mark on the world stage, demonstrating the strength and reach of the American military in the post-Cold War era. In fact, the Gulf War is widely seen as the first true test of the US military's might, and it did not disappoint. The conflict showcased the technological prowess of the US military with the use of stealth aircraft, precision-guided munitions, and other advanced technologies, leaving Iraqi forces outmatched and overwhelmed. Moreover, the war demonstrated the reach and power of the US-led coalition, which involved forces from more than 30 countries. The successful conclusion of the war solidified the United States' position as the sole superpower in the world and set the tone for American foreign policy for the remainder of the 1990s. It was also impossible not to notice the absence of one man throughout the entire conflict. Where was Saddam Hussein? Well, as it turns out, he spent the entire war hiding in a hole. That's right. While his army was being decimated and his country being liberated, Saddam was hiding in a secret underground bunker beneath his presidential palace in Baghdad. And even then, things weren't exactly comfortable. The bunker was poorly designed and lacked basic amenities, such as ventilation and running water. But Saddam was determined to stay hidden as he feared capture and execution at the hands of the Americans. His paranoia was understandable, given that his regime had been responsible for some of the worst atrocities in recent history, from the Iran-Iraq War to the invasion of Kuwait. Nevertheless, Saddam's decision to hide in a hole rather than face his enemies was seen as a sign of weakness and cowardice by many, and when he was finally captured in 2003 and executed 2 years later, the world got the closure it had been waiting for. In the aftermath of the war, Iraq was left in ruins and the country's economy was devastated. The once proud nation had been reduced to a shadow of its former self, and it would take years for Iraq to recover from the devastation of the war. Additionally, the war had a profound impact on the Middle East as a whole, setting the stage for future conflicts in the region. The rise of Islamic fundamentalism and the ongoing struggle between Israel and Palestine are just 2 examples of how the Gulf War has shaped the Middle East in the years since. Still, despite the immense challenges and controversies surrounding the conflict, one thing is clear: the Gulf War was a pivotal moment in world history. It was a conflict that showcased the growing influence of the United States on the world stage, the changing nature of international conflict, and the growing importance of technology in modern warfare. And in the years since, the legacy of the Gulf War continues to be felt around the world. In conclusion, the Gulf War was a pivotal moment in world history that had a profound impact on the Middle East and the world as a whole. The conflict demonstrated the growing influence of the United States on the world stage, the changing nature of international conflict, and the growing importance of technology in modern warfare. The war also had a lasting impact on Iraq and the Middle East as a whole, setting the stage for future conflicts in the region. Despite its challenges and controversies, the Gulf War remains an important lesson in military strategy, international relations, and the use of force in international affairs. What do you think? How would you have handled the situation? Let us know your thoughts. Also, please subscribe for more videos. Thank you for watching.